Good day, ladies and gents. How are you all going? Thanks for tuning in to the Silly Talks Music Podcast. I'm your host, Saba, from the Silly McWiggles project. I'm super pumped to bring you these next two episodes, which are an awesome collaboration between Truly Yours, aka me, and an Aussie business bringing the sexy back to the way many of us used to listen to music when we were kids. Kathy Wilson approached me with a slightly different proposal to start. But that proposal is also a part of this collaboration for now. I know, it all sounds super cryptic, so let me go back to the beginning. Suitcase Records is a vinyl pressing plant based in Brisbane. They do heaps of cool things, which we'll talk about in the two episodes. One of them is not strictly related to working with the black disc though. It's more about engaging people from the music business like bloggers, journalists, content creators, and music fans with something to say overall. If you're up for it, you're invited to talk about the music of one of the artists Suitcase Records has pressed for, as a form of an oral album review. The segment is called I Just Heard a New Album, and that's how Kathy cheekily lured me into this project. If you want to know which record I've reviewed, you'll need to be patient though. It comes at the end of the second episode, and I'm not giving anything away just yet. But when Kathy contacted me, I thought it would be super interesting to find out more about the art and craft of working in the vinyl pressing field, because it seems that we've lost that knowledge about the black disc in our modern digital times. I remember listening to vinyl records at home with my parents when I was young, but I don't know anymore how it all works, to be honest, and I believe I'm not the only one. Kathy seemed like the perfect guide on this subject. So, one fine day, we sat down in front of our respective screens on two opposite sides of the world to go in depth into both the technicalities and the creative part of the business. As usual, you'll learn more about Kathy and her business in the Anchor episode. In this first one though, I'll let Kathy convince you that she is a vinyl pressing subject matter expert. And since the last few years have clearly shown us that vinyl is reclaiming its rightful place in the music business, I decided to kick off the chat from another angle. Why is vinyl back? Is it because we now love all things vintage? Is it because the sound is experienced in a different way when reproduced from the black disc? Or is there any other reason?
I think all of those things. I think there's both a pull from consumers and a push from artists, if you like. And one of the great joys in my day-to-day life is that we work with these really talented artists, literally day after day after day. They come through our door and I guess it's the same as a lot of art forms. It's really hard to make money from art, right? And streaming is really good for a lot of things in terms of discoverability and things, but it's really hard to make money out of it. But vinyl and other merch is one of the places that musicians who are switched on and kind of together can make significant money, because if they're smart, they make good choices around vinyl, then they pre-sell it, and that's how they grow their market, and that's how they get their fans. At the same time, coincidentally or not, I think there's this great hunger amongst fans to connect with artists. I see it all the time as well. And I think by buying vinyl, fans are able to support the musicians that they love. And I think fans are smart enough to know that. But also they get to experience the music in the way the artist intended it to be. So they get the large form, the jacket artwork, which can often be an artwork in itself. They get the order of the songs, the way it's presented. One of the great things we have is that there's various add-ons that you can put into vinyl as well, booklets and brochures and liner notes and all that kind of stuff. So I think between those two things, I think it's a really good marriage.
So can we talk about the technicalities of it? So how is music written onto the disc itself, and at what stage is it done?
So we reckon it's a some sort of combination of engineering, physics, and witchcraft, because it's all those things. So an artist comes to us and they give us their audio file, mastered for vinyl. Put aside all the artwork and all that kind of stuff, that's another conversation. But if you just focus on the music for a moment, we take that audio file and send it across to the UK to a lacquer cutter. And the lacquer cutter takes the digital music and makes a physical representation of it into lacquer, which is a bit like a record player, but it's soft. You could play it, but you could only play it once because it gets damaged very easily. So that's kind of where the first physical thing happens. And it's literally microscopic movements within the needle picks up through a magnetic field to make the sound. So the lacquer then goes to a stamper house, also in the UK, and they use a process of galvanics to grow what is effectively the negative of the lacquer, and a backing gets put onto it, and that gets shipped back to us in our factory. We'd use that stamper and put it onto our molds, so, you know, A on top, B on bottom, and melt plastic through it at really high temperature and really high pressure, and get an exact representation. So the stampers are the negative, so we get the positive representation of the record. At the end of the day, we're squishing plastic. Yeah. It's amazing to me that it works, but because the process is so exacting, we do get it beautiful. You know, we get a beautiful representation of the music. And one of the challenges to us when we were first setting up the business was that there were so many places along the way that things can go wrong. So now, you know, nearly 3 years later, we've got this brilliant supply chain. Our lacquer cutters are brilliant. Our stampers house is brilliant. We've got all our PVC, you know, all our temperatures and all that sort of stuff under control. But in the early days, there were just so many variables. It's hard to know what trigger to pull to improve the vinyl. So now I think it's craftsmanship and magic and engineering all squished in together.
Okay, bear with us here, please. This chat has a solid amount of technical vocabulary, I realize that. But it's important that you, like me, come to understand the whole process. Because, as Kathy said, vinyl pressing is equal parts craftsmanship, magic, and engineering. Before chatting to Kathy, I'd checked out some videos on her company's website. They help you picture all those elements and machinery she's just mentioned. But because I'm not a tech-related person myself, it still sounded a bit like rocket science to me. So I honestly started wondering whether you actually need an engineering degree to embrace the whole thing. Interestingly though, Kathy's background is different. Spoiler alert, she used to work in corporate comms, and her husband Neil is an architect by profession. I assumed they needed to do some due diligence before starting the plant to know what they were actually getting themselves into. But how did they approach the whole thing? Did they do extensive research online and offline? Did they speak to other people doing a similar thing in the land down under? Or maybe they just decided to dive in head first and figure out everything else along the way? It turns out it was all those things, to a certain extent. And here's how the idea was born.
We were perhaps a little bit naive, I think, if in perfect honesty, which is probably a good thing because we might not have done it had we not. So we committed to it. And my husband and our son flew over to the UK to learn, so to a company over there who has the same machines as us. So they spent, I think, maybe 3 or 4 weeks over there while they were commissioning their machine, learning about how the machine worked. Then they came back. Our machine then came out, and the manufacturer of the machine came out and helped us to commission our machine here. All of that sounds like at the end of that time, we'd know exactly what to do, right? But it's a really complicated machine. And the best way I can explain it, there's the engineering side of the machine. So there's the making the machine work. And you probably saw it on our side, but you can see it's robotics. It's a really high-tech piece of kit. So that's sort of element one, is to make sure the machine continues to work, the robotics work, the PC units all work and all that kind of stuff. And that's reasonably under control. But the other part of it is just the vagaries around So, for example, it responds to temperature and humidity differently. So we can have all the settings exactly right one day and then rains overnight. And we come in the next day and we have to change, and suddenly the machine's not working. It's not making nice records again. So we have to change it all. One of our operators calls our machine, and he's convinced she's a female, and she has good days and bad days. And
It's the female's fault, yeah.
no, actually it's not. He's just in love with her. It's
Okay.
a really lovely thing, but it's like we talk about her almost as if she's a person
Okay.
in the factory. She's having a bad day today, it's Monday, or oh, she's killing it today. It's so in short, we learned what we could from the sources that we could, and then we just had a baptism of fire. One of the things that turned out to be a real strength for us is that we were a little bit quieter than we had anticipated for our first year. Um, and that wasn't brilliant for our bottom line. But what it was brilliant for was that we could take our time on every project. And there are times when we were doing a run of 100, we pressed 400 records until we were happy to get it right. And had we been overwhelmed and busy in that first year, we just wouldn't have had that luxury. So our first year was really our apprenticeship, if you like. It was learning on the job, trying things, calling people, learning. Was it smart? I do not know, but here we are.
I guess you learn every day anyway in any kind of discipline.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Like how does it work with automation? Because you said robotics and stuff. So where does the human come in all that process? So you just kind of program the machine and it goes through all these stages itself, and then you like put my understanding of it would be like you put in the cues and stuff, and then the machine does all the work, and at the end of the line, let's say you've got this record that comes out. So in between there is no human input whatsoever. Is that how it works?
That's what I thought. That was how I thought it
Right.
worked. I kid you not. I thought we'd just buy a pressing machine and, plug it in and kind of walk away and it would be done. But what you describe is broadly correct.
Mhm.
Each of the steps, and a lot of the steps haven't changed that much since the early days, but the old school technology is connected by robotics, right? In our machine. But every step along the way, small things can go wrong and small things have to be tweaked.
Right.
It's automated, except that there's humans standing there going, yeah, no, that's wrong. We need to tweak that. That's wrong. Give that another second. We need to give that another 10 degrees. It's so not automated,
Mhm.
except that it is. I guess it's an automation with a human, it's with a craftsman's overlay.
And yeah, I'm glad that you said that because that really means that this is still a very time-consuming process when it comes to like perfecting everything. So, which brings me to the question I wanted to ask next, which was like the follow-up, but it ties in nicely. So, how many projects can you take on at once? So, when you're doing something, would it be just you're pressing just for one artist, and then until that project is finished, you don't take on any more commissions, or can you do multiple things at the same time?
So on a good day, we press about 1,000 records a day. So it can be one order. We do orders up to 5,000 and 6,000. So that can be a full week. But we also do orders as small as 100. So that could be 10 small orders throughout the day. And right now, we probably have 90 jobs on our books at various stages of being created. And we just keep them coming through. We are yet to get to a point that we're too busy. We're pretty much at a full shift
Mhm.
every day now, and we can still go to a shift and a half as we need to. Basically, we just manage all the projects as they come along and fit them in as
Okay.
they work.
Oh.
Don't forget, on top of that, you've also got to change colors of PVC. So in a run of 1,000, if we were doing all black, that's one thing. But if you've got red, black, so we have to be smart about how we program it all in.
But okay,
Yeah.
because you mentioned that you have the supplier, in the UK. Can I ask why UK? Is it because it's not like back in Australia to the extent that you would have like suppliers there that you could rely on, or is it because it's more cost effective?
In Australia, there's no commercial lacquer and stamper house at all. When we originally started, we were going to the States. I think we probably planned that we would have bought the lacquer and stamper facilities in-house as we got more mature as a business. As we've learned more about the process of making vinyl, I now realize that if the part of it that we do is craft, and it's taken us 3 years to really get it great, the stamper and lacquer side of it is equally, it's a craft. It's not like you can just stick it in a machine and pull it out. And the people that we use, they've got 30 and 40 years experience doing what they do. They've got these massively high-end equipment, and we can get it here quickly if we need to. If we can find what we consider to be the best in the world, why would we not, I guess?
Okay. Well, it's interesting that you wouldn't have any company that would be specializing in that in Australia yet. So there is a business to open as well, if
Yeah,
any.
yeah. It might be coming. I think that that's probably right. I think a lot of people forget, you, I guess, probably know this, but Australia's population is quite small. So compared to anywhere, just about, and then take the numbers and figure out the vinyl, the music lovers, and then figure out of those music lovers how many people are buying vinyl. So our numbers, they're a lot smaller, and they're a lot harder to make it stack up in Australia.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't surprise me to be honest. But on that
Yeah.
note as well, so you said you were the third vinyl pressing company to open in Australia. Is there
Uh-huh.
already still three, or is there any more?
Yes, there is. So there's one, the other two are in Melbourne.
Mhm.
One's been around for a really long time. Another one opened a couple of years before us.
Okay.
There is talk of some others, but I'm not aware of it. There's also a plant in New Zealand.
Crazy, right? There's quite a lot of work going into pressing vinyl. I didn't realize that, and it makes my head spin. And I'm not only talking about the process itself, but all the logistics and the fine, intricate details you need to pay attention to every step of the way. So now that we have all the basics down, let's talk about any significant challenges or things to consider when pressing vinyl. Let's suppose you're an artist wanting to commission a batch of beautiful vinyl for your next release. Can pretty much anything be done on the creative front, or does technology limit the art to some extent?
One of the things that we sort of have to communicate with clients is that a lot of people, particularly younger folk, are really used to working in a digital world. The thing with vinyl is that it's physical. It's a physical, real thing that just has physical limitations. So the length of each side has to be contained. So you can run a CD, actually, I don't know how long, but very long. But you need to keep both sides of the vinyl to around 20 minutes a side. And the reason for that is you just need the space for the grooves to go around. You can make it a little bit longer than that, and we have, but it means that the overall cut can be softer, which is sometimes a compromise that artists are willing to make. So there's that. There's just the physical limitation of the amount of music you can fit on your album. Once you accept that it's a real thing operating in the real world, one of the nice things is that we've got all these people around us who somehow, all of our suppliers love vinyl as well. I don't know if we attracted them, or I don't know how that worked, but we sort of all get together, and we all love nothing better than to say, well, here's what the artist wants to do. And somehow we nearly always make it work. So as much as the imagination can go, we can go pretty close to it.
Okay. But one of the things that you mentioned, which I think has a lot to do with like let's say the younger generations, is that a lot of music, like, and especially in streaming now, is based on singles, so you would drop singles instead of so like an album. So in case of vinyl, you guys deal normally with like the full albums, so you don't do singles, right? Or can it be done as well?
We do 12-inch, so we do, the large size ones. We don't have a mold to do the 7-inch. We have done singles. We've certainly done albums where there's just two tracks on each side. We've done one where we've had a blank one side and just one song on the other side. Again, because that's what artists want, and that's, what their demand is. We do occasionally get asked about 7-inch. It's just not something we focus on. What we tend to do, I guess, is come along towards the end of that process. So they've dropped all their albums. We then do one of the things that we're having a lot of success with is offering pre-sales on our site. So what that means is all the albums are dropped. They can be out in the public domain, absolutely. And then we do pre-sales for the album. So the artist has collected all those fans, and then the fan wants to engage with the vinyl. So in a perfect world, by the time the pre-sale date comes along, the pre-sale has often paid for the cost of the vinyl. Sometimes we give them cash back as well. So we're at the end of that release continuum, if you like.
From what Kathy has been telling me so far, limitations are pretty limited, unintended, when it comes to pressing vinyl and the creative side of it. But let's get realistic as well. Things happen, like issues with the supply chain or the package landing where it's not supposed to. Those would be my guesses, for example. And you have absolutely no control over those mess-ups. What you can do though is try and fix or improve the process for the future. So I also quizzed Kathy about some lessons learned, to put it diplomatically, that will go down in Suitcase Records history books. Even though there is no need for finger pointing in this bit, it's good to know where and how things can go south in such a complex operation. Here's what Kathy had to say about it.
It doesn't happen as often as you'd think, but it has happened. And I think because we're so new and so hands-on, we've always fixed it. I don't believe we've ever had an artist walk away unhappy. We do everything we can to make it right and make it work. In the early days, and it hasn't happened recently, she says, touching wood, but the process I described earlier where the stampers come in from the UK, twice we've had customs open them up, pull out the stampers, and you can imagine. I know. I guess they don't know what they are, so I don't know what they did with them, but they kind of squished them together and threw them back in the box, and so yeah, you take one look at them and go, yeah, well, that's just not going to work. So we had to race back through, get the whole lacquer and stamper process again, and that in that particular case we were on as luck would have it, we were on a tight deadline. But again, because we've somehow, through sheer luck or something, surrounded ourselves with good people, we can now send an emergency email to Stamperdisc, who the stamper production house in the UK. And because of the time difference, we have actually, in that particular occasion, so disaster stamper situation has occurred. We sent an email at 7:00 at night, just as we're about to go to bed. Mm-hmm. And by the next morning, by the time we get up, they've replated it and the stamper is back on its way to us. Nice. 12 hours later. So, and we've been known to get it sort of 3 days after that happening. So everything's fixable. And the biggest enemy we have is time, because the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night is that we miss an artist's launch party. Yeah. We haven't done that. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is we're really careful about dates. We factor in basically it's about 8 weeks from the time we start to the time that we can safely say the albums will be back. That allows us a few things to go wrong. So we can get that earlier, but if it goes wrong, we can do a couple of emergency calls and pull it in. We've also had jackets show up with the couriers where I guess they put a forklift through the boxes and ruined a third of the jackets. And again, you just have to go back to your suppliers, and people work through the night, and we have not uncommonly pressed over the weekend because something's gone wrong and we've just had to make up some time. So yeah, stuff goes wrong. We also have really stringent QA processes. So we check things really, really thoroughly before they leave here. So it'd be something really out of the box for a final product to get to the artist and for there to be a problem. We would expect to pick it up. And at least if we pick it up at our end, we know we've got enough time to fix it.
Okay. And remind me again when your company started, what year was it?
So 2.5 years ago. So was that 22? Does that sound right? Yeah.
So when I look at the list of the artists that you've pressed for already, like I even recognize a lot of names on that list. So for 2.5 years of running the business, I think it's amazing what you've achieved so far.
Yeah, we are really thrilled.
And that really shows the demand, and the potential demand in Australia as well for people who want to do it. But okay, this is a cheeky question, and you don't have to give me a specific number, but it's just also kind of to gauge the interest from the Australian music industry, because you said it's a good way for artists as well to kind of have additional income and to connect with their audiences on a different level. But is this a profitable business for you? As in, do you have to invest much more than you getting out of it right now, or do you break even, or are you actually making money on it after those 2.5 years?
It's a very valid question. So there's a pretty significant capital outlay to start it, as I'm sure you can imagine. There's the press, but there's also, we've got a whole bunch of auxiliary items. We've got a boiler, a chiller, a compressor, so warehouse factory. So there's really high overheads. And at the end of the day, we are a manufacturer. We are a manufacturer of quite cool things, but we're still a manufacturer, and we have pretty slim margins. So, as you said, so we're coming up into our third year. We are getting close to breaking even now. It's not the kind of business that you would start to make squillions of dollars.
Yet.
But that said, like everything, I think quality and great service, I think we just want to grow a business that everybody loves, that we want to work in. And at some point, we'd like to make some money, but it's not, we didn't really do it to make money. No, that's a dumb thing to say. It was part of it, and our business plan stacked up. But the vagaries of the industry mean that, it's tricky in any industry, I think, at the moment to make money.
Now, this is where we're going to pause the conversation for now. Just think about it. Vinyl was popular 30, 40 years ago? And it was pretty much everywhere back then, so I'm assuming there were heaps of factories that manufactured it. Then, boom, cassettes and CDs come into play. And then the digital world takes over the music biz. So most of those factories probably went bust. What a shame, right? And now that vinyl is back again, we need to set those factories up from scratch. No wonder it's still a tough business to break even. But I'm rooting for Suitcase Records. They seem to be doing an amazing job on that front. And that has everything to do with how the company is run and the relationships they have fostered with the labels and Aussie artists. This is what we'll be covering in the Encore episode. Whilst you're waiting for part 2 of this convo, check out Suitcase Records and browse the type of vinyl they make. We'll refer to that in the next episode, so it will be easier for you to picture it. You will find the link to their website in the show's notes. Also, part of this conversation is on my YouTube channel under the Silly and Green segment. It's dedicated to sustainability in the music business, so you'll hear Kathy talk me through the green initiatives at Suitcase Records, like how to make plastic less plastic. That link is also in the show's notes. You guessed it. Speaking of my channels, if you're a diehard Aussie music fan, you should definitely visit my sillymcwiggles.blog. Every Wednesday, I post there things like interviews with bands, news from the biz, album reviews, and my op-eds, also known as emotional rants on topics I find relevant. Finally, I'm always keen on hearing constructive criticism on how to improve the content or suggestions for topics to cover. Feel free to hit me up on socials or drop me an email. I'm Silly McWiggles pretty much everywhere online, and my email is, again, in the show's notes. Thanks heaps for listening today. The Encore episode is dropping really soon. By the way, you can follow the podcast wherever you normally listen to it, right? That way you'll never miss an episode in your life. Think about it for me, okay? Bye for now.